Yeah, I'll have a seat.
Okay, in case you didn't notice, we have the sign-in sheet where we keep attendance over there, and we have cookies over there, and you are almost required to take a cookie, so.
And the segment.
And we're glad to see some faces we haven't seen for a while because they've been busy on fires in the summer. So I think what we'll do, since there are a few new people since the old regulars haven't been here, we'll go around the room one time and introduce ourselves.
Also, quick reminder, the owl doesn't pick up on sound very well. So especially if you're further back, just kind of use your outdoor voices, talk way louder than you think you should.
So start with Ella.
My name is Ella Langer. I'm the Fire Adapted Communities Coordinator for the Montana DNRC and the co-chair of the council.
And I'm Judy Anderson, private landowner and the other co-counsel.
Kimberly Richardson, Montana State University, the agricultural, horticultural, and natural resources agent here in the Bitterroot and serve as your facilitator.
That's a mouthful.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotten good at it.
Kimberly, she just said I do it all.
Yes. Christina Ragsdale, landowner here outside on the west side of Victor.
Dan McConnell, Hamilton Unit, DNRC Foresters. Josh Smith, Bitterroot RC&D. Ken Brewer, Lawrence Fire.
Matt Young, Deputy Fire Staff on the Bitterroot, Living Forks.
Claire Jocks, Hamilton Unit, manager for DNRC.
Mike Kent, I'm with the Veteran Board of Realtors, private landowner, retired emergency services.
Sterling Dahl, Victor Fire.
Al Bailey, representative in Ranger Farm and Ranch for Valley County.
Lauren Pedro, I'm a resident in Hamilton.
Zach Phillips, I live in Hamilton and had a targeted grazing business.
Gary Orem, Valley County Forester.
Stewart Fire, Public Information Officer in Bitterroot.
Blake Saxon, I coordinate the fire at the Montana Network of DNRC out of the city. Russ Gazelle, the fire prevention officer for the International.
This wildfire prevention in your town.
Steve Brown, District Ranger, Darby Sula. Jeff Rodgers, Valley County OEM.
And Zoomers, we have Laura, would you like to introduce yourself?
You are muted. You are muted,
They're still
Laura.
muted.
That is Laura Jackson.
And she's awesome.
She can only hear herself.
So Laura, we assume you introduced yourself, but
I found it. Yes, I'm here. Laura Jackson, private landowner, board member of the Bitterroot Climate Action Group. That's it.
anybody else on Zoom?
Nobody else on Zoom.
Okay. We attached the minutes from last meeting to the newsletter and the reminder for tonight's meeting. And we assume you all read that because you were
I did.
anxious. You were anxiously waiting to see it. So we're asking if there are any questions or suggested changes to the minutes as they were presented. Anybody have any? Nobody is speaking up, so the minutes are approved from last meeting. All right, financial report.
Lovely. We have spent no dollars since the last meeting, so we're still sitting at 4,283, 1 cent. That will change soon though, because we're going to be booking our fair spot this week because apparently that's opening up that early. So stay tuned. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
But if we want the same spot, we have to do it. I guess a month ago. She acted like I was a little late to the game, which I thought was crazy.
Oh,
Conversation. Good.
okay. Yeah, we do want to be near the the Forest Service booth, so. Okay, can you also give us the outreach team report, Ella?
Yes, first, just to quick hit the funding team, there are no updates to the CWDG application.
Yeah, same. We're going through our third round of edits. So kind of an overview of it. It's the $5 million worth of treatment and then $1 million for firing the root council to do education outreach and kind of expand on the stuff we're doing here. So
Perfect. For outreach team, all we have on the docket right now is the 5th grade wildfire education program. We've got 9 dates on the calendar. We're gonna hit 9 different schools. And hopefully, not hopefully, we're gonna reach every 5th grader in the valley. So we'll be doing basically a 45-minute to an hour and a half long lesson in each science period for every 5th grade science class. So if you're interested in tagging along on one of those visits, let me know. We have a couple folks that are interested. We don't have 9. So if you'd like to come along, whether you're teaching a lesson or you're just kind of assistant teaching, please let me know because it's going to be a blast. And we have a lot of science periods to cover. And I'm going to go brain dead. So please come
Oh my
along.
God.
Where are you short?
Huh?
Which ones are you short?
Not sure yet, because some folks still need to respond to the email. But I will send that out continually over the next month. They're going all the way through right now, April. Just kind of spreading out where teachers want them. So they'll be mostly concentrated in January, with a couple in February, and then one full day long event from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. in April. So we'll need a lot of help for that one. Other than that, we don't really have any other outreach team updates. The last meeting was canceled just due to a low agenda. So our next meeting is going to be on December 19th, 10 a.m. at the Bitterroot National Forest Conference Room, specific room TBD.
Okay. And you're up for assessment team also.
Awesome. We are donezo for the season. We did a hard cutoff first week in November and are just taking signups for the spring now. So we have about 10 people on the docket to start doing in March, as well as about 15 from the Firewise community are all interested in doing the full assessment. So we got quite a lot planned already for the springtime. But total 2024, we got 70 assessments done. So that will
Woohoo!
kind of put in our minds what our number goals can be for next year. We're thinking 100, 150,
What did we do
a
last?
million. Last year we did 35. So double.
Double.
Let's see if we can double it again next year.
Wow.
150.
Let's do it. 150.
That would be after training so that more people could do it.
Yes. I don't think I could do 150.
All right. Yeah, the last day that she did 3 assessments in a row, it was cold and windy, and that was her decision to, okay, we're done.
For me, mostly it was I'd start saying something and then I'd just stop and I couldn't remember any of the script. Couldn't remember why I was there, what I was talking about. I was just going brain dead. So that was that's when I decided to stop, was when I was just terribly tongue tied the whole time.
She recovers very well, even though she thinks she was standing there looking blank. She wasn't looking that way. All right, we had a bylaws team meeting. You may remember we asked for volunteers to be on the bylaws team. And we had a meeting, we finally could all get together. And we're going to ask Christina to give a summary of what we did at that meeting.
Great. Yeah, so thanks to all volunteers who showed up the day before Thanksgiving. That was interesting. But, and thanks for loaning us your house, Judy. The idea was, I think we know we have some money coming in and there's a lot of new opportunities for funding. And so, the idea was we're gonna need a more structured, formal setup. You know, what should that look like? What's the timing? So we had pretty in-depth discussion of how that might work. And that involves, filing with the Secretary of State for the 501c3 or another subset, but I think C3 is probably where we're headed. And what is the best timing? And so a lot of information was shared about upcoming grant opportunities and all that may affect that. So there are some that are currently available and some in February, I think, are the filing deadlines. And, making sure that we have all of that in place in time. So then timing became kind of a big discussion because you need officers and you need a structure for who's going to handle the money and all of that. So we came to the conclusion that what we wanted to recommend was that we have temporary officers, just so we have placeholders so that we can go ahead and do the filing. And then have a more formal structure and election of officers sometime later this year, hopefully by the summer, that will fill all the positions, but have 3 people in key roles just to make sure that we can do all the grant applications that we want to do. And we had 3 team members, Judy, Ken, and Mike Kent, who volunteered to take on that role for the short term, hopefully just 3 or 4 months to get those things done, and also set up how a vetting process, a nominating and interview process and voting process for more permanent board members. So that is what we decided to do. And then we're hoping that we can take a vote and the group will authorize us to proceed with that. And then we can get going on not just accepting the money that we've already got coming, but to go and apply for more, so we can do more.
Great. Yeah, so I imagine there could be a few questions before we take a vote. Was that pretty clear on what we want to do?
Yeah, it was very clear, I think. It probably would be appropriate to set a definite time limit on, how long the term for the temporary representatives will be, even if it's longer than you think, just so that we have something set up for that. If we fail to get it together by then, we can reapprove or assess what we're trying to do. That would seem the one thing. Getting the Secretary of State, the only time I've been through it, it literally was fill out a form and send them $25 and it was done. They didn't seem to need very much, but that may have changed. That was 5 years ago.
The more pressing thing is some of these grant opportunities, and we need to be an entity in order to apply, so.
Right, be in what? Oh, yeah, but they will, the state 501c3 thing is quite easy. If they require the federal one, that becomes a whole different ballgame. That's even the short process, I think, is 6 months from what I remember.
Mike?
I think we need to be recognized both state and federal on a 501c3, seeing how some of this money might be coming federal money.
That's probably correct. As I said, I've only been through this process once. We went ahead and got the state one. That was, basically 3 clicks on the computer, as I recall. I didn't do the clicks. Someone was doing them in the kitchen behind me. It was very easy to do. Getting the federal one is a totally separate process. And there are 2 versions of that process. I'm assuming this hasn't changed. This is at least 3 years ago. And the short process, as I remember, was about 6 months to do. And because it isn't as carefully regulated and vetted, it is not adequate for some grant applications, was the understanding at the time. So we took advantage of an opportunity to take over another nonprofit's pre-existing status as a federal one. And then we just use that from sustainable living systems, and we do business as, it's a fairly straightforward thing that often happens, and we do business as Bitterroot Climate Action Group. So we essentially dodged having to do the federal one, and I can't tell you anything more than if you know someone who already has that status for a group that is going a bit inactive, grab it.
The Bitterroot RC&D, that's kind of what we do for a lot of nonprofits in the Bitterroot, so I don't want you guys not having the federal status to derail your potential to apply for these grants, but I'd have to go in front of my board and have it approved too for you guys to go under that status, but typically that's what the Bitterroot RC&D does is we kind of help people starting off. And then eventually, usually, once you receive that 501 C3 PO, and then you guys usually go off on your own. And so we'll take care of all the accounting, all the reporting and stuff that you have to do to the feds, whatnot, so.
Which is what we're doing with the CW.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
So what you're saying is you think we're covered just doing the state process for now?
yeah, but I mean, I guess if you guys are gonna try and apply for your own grants just under Fire in the Root, you know, you have to have all that, I think, stuff set up to receive. grants.
Yeah, and I'm not sure,
I would suggest that you just go through the state process. In the federal process, once you get the state process done, to get your 501(c)(3) status, then you'll have to set yourself up with the system or ward management account. Because even if you do the federal process, you're still gonna need that specific account because that SAM account is basically your federal bank account. So it's your, that's where the money gets put that you have access to. And anybody that gets federal awards needs that SAM account. Before times you used to have to have a DUNS number, but now it's a unique entity identifier number. And that's what takes sometimes between, sometimes you get a month, sometimes it takes 6 months to get. So that's what I would be, if you're intending to get any sort of federal award, you want to call it state grant money, is you need your business entity, and then you need that system forward management account, then you need entity identity.
so Kimberly, can you add anything to that? Do we, based on who you've worked with before?
Yeah, so 4-H actually kind of works like with the RC&D, like the state office kind of does the federal side of it, where each of us locally does it just by the state. And so I would agree with Gary that probably getting that federal status, but initially getting your state one, we should probably just push that through, get that set and squared away, because then you can dual file. And I mean, I think we're in the right area right now, especially if we can beat the tax season. I think that will be critical, like trying to get all of that in before then they get just slammed in April. So, I mean, the sooner the better for the group.
You know, it might, what Josh is describing might also, I mean, if he goes to his board and says, we have a nonprofit who wishes to use our established, status, and they say, yes, we would at least have that for the interim. I don't know how it's worked normally with RC&D, if they kind of spin it off and some of it's done by the individual group, like fundraising, and then the money comes through them. We'd have to get that set up, but that might be a way to cover the next 6 months for federally required, for grants that require a federal status.
Yeah.
Josh just said, yeah.
Fine.
Already, with Bitterroot RC&D for the Community Wildfire Defense Grant that we discussed a little while ago.
and I'm thinking if
Louder,
guys, and
Josh.
I guess if you guys end up, becoming that 501(c)(3) and it might turn into it could turn into pass through funding from us to you guys with this grant. And so that might be an opportunity to kind of fund the initial, if we get it, to fund that additional startup costs with all the accounting and all that stuff that will go with grant stuff.
Right.
So I think we are prepared to just file with the state. And that's all we're asking for authority to do from the council tonight.
And to have the temporary.
And to have the 3 temporary officers approved. Cause nobody else volunteered.
And we will need to get a structure established and a board established, and as soon as we do that, then the 3 temporaries are off the hook.
Right.
Yeah, and like Laura said too, in our next bylaws meeting, we can appoint a specific time for that temporary board to be in place. And that can be part of the next meeting too, is announcing that specific residence time in that position.
But it, basically, as soon as we have a more permanent board seated, they're done.
Mhm.
And so it depends on how quickly we can act to establish a structure. Took us a while to do an informal team structure. And it may take us that long or longer, or maybe not, to do a more formal board structure.
Well, Kimberly has worked with a lot of different organizations and she's worked through helping people get an application put together for potential people to be on a board and announce it in the paper and have an evaluation team and all of that. So we think we're ready to start moving fairly quickly.
And I think you all have laid the foundation for where you all wanted to be. I mean, you all knew that this was coming. And now we have arrived at that point. You know, the informal team structure worked really well. I think it can still be utilized underneath the board structure. There'll just be a little bit of tweaking, but then there'll actually be a board that gets to kind of have that voting privilege, et cetera. And, you know, the discussions that went on with the bylaws committees, there's a lot of different ways that can look, but I think we have all of the necessary components, all the necessary pieces to move forward, and any other structure that the bylaws team feels is suitable for the fire and the rip.
Yeah, I guess my only concern really is, having lived through the what it took us to get this far. What if the decision of the group just simply, we don't want a board? I mean, that's kind of what happened, a year and a half ago. I don't know if that will repeat or not, but somehow to be at least prepared for this may be a group that does not want the responsibilities, which are financial, reporting to the feds, all sorts of things. And there's no one among us. I mean, we have a great treasurer and she does it, but if we don't have that person, then what happens? And do we say, okay, we simply can't go further down this road. We'll have to continue, you know, what we're doing with RC&D and hope it works.
I'm optimistic that we can make it happen. I think early on, there were a lot of people that thought we should get a board structure sooner than we are doing it now. And I'm not hearing people saying we should not go there.
I think there was a widespread recognition when we established the team structure that this was that would serve us for a while. And that we would get to the point when we needed to become a 501c3 and partner with people or entities like Bitterroot RC&D and Pheasants Forever and whoever to move forward. So I think the recognition was there when we started the team structure that we were going to get to the point where we needed a more formal board structure.
We just weren't there yet, but I think we are now because
Yeah.
now we're talking about real money.
Right. Yeah,
in
we
order
were
to
talking
accept
about
those
what
money,
ifs
You've
when
got
we
it.
set up the team structure. Well, what if we did this? What if we did that? Could we partner with, but now it's not what if, it's when.
Well,
And
when
it-
you file
yeah,
for a nonprofit, you have to have a president, vice president, and secretary.
Right.
You have to name.
Treasurer.
Well, the secretary and treasurer could be one person.
Right, you have to have three entities, which is why we have 3 volunteers. And, to move forward as temporary officers. Until we can get a structure and get a process to get more permanent board officers.
Right.
Well, and I also believe by choosing your informal team structure, you did kind of put some groundwork to make this happen so that the bylaws committee or team can actually go in and do all the homework. So the rest of the group doesn't have to sit through meeting after meeting of having that discussion. It's going to be conducted by that team that then will present it in a 5-minute fashion so that everybody is on page. And that is why we want that informal structure to go.
Yeah,
from
that was an
beginning.
hour-and-a-half discussion
And
last
yeah,
week.
and then, like that's why you have your vested bylaws team and your other teams here. Is so that they can do all the research, they can do all of that discussion and deliberation, so then when it's time for the meeting, we're able to move forward with all of the business action and items that need to be taken care of in that meeting, so we can move forward effectively and productively.
Exactly.
As opposed to being tied up in multiple discussions amongst everybody, and again, I don't think any of the teams are not willing to hear anybody's outside comments either. I think that you all, as members, get to say and put your feedback wherever you'd like to put it in. And I think it will still, at moving into a formal structure, you'll still have that opportunity. It's just gonna be very formal. There'll be, like a public comment or an outside of business area for that, but there'll still be an opportunity to add your feedback in.
So with that, the back of our ballot states it's a yes or no, and what we're saying is, do I authorize the bylaws team to move forward to complete the business registration process with the Montana Secretary of State and to approve Judy Anderson, Ken Brewer, and Mike Kent to temporarily, underline temporarily, represent Fire in the Root in this process?
And who gets to vote?
I'm glad you asked.
We will remind you.
Oh,
So, the previous, by previous, I mean pre-March 2024 requirement for voting was that members had put in 20.5 active hours of participation or volunteering. However, in March 2024, in a meeting, I watched the video today, I wasn't present yet. You all decided to reduce the amount to 10.5 hours of active participation. So any member that has done 10.5 volunteer hours in the last 12 consecutive months, so from now, 12 months back, who is not part of a federal, state, or county agency, is eligible to vote. So that means all these people in light blue are eligible as they've done their required hours and they are not part of any government agency. The last thing you need to be eligible to vote is to sign our voting contract, which just holds you to that specific criteria of needing that 12 consecutive month, 10.5 hours. So
Pass those around.
we're gonna pass those around
yeah,
as well.
thanks for being
some
passed
pen.
around. I'll just read them out loud.
Ella,
Everyone is-
Ella, there is one, there is in what you just read out, and it was right there on the page. You also have to have included in your time one project outside of attending a monthly meeting.
Yes. So Judy and I were chatting about that, and there
One
is very
extra
little
event.
way for us to track that. As unfortunately, as Qualtrics is a very handy way to track hours, not many of us are actually tracking those hours in Qualtrics. So while meetings are thoroughly tracked, team meetings, outreach, bylaws, general council meetings, there's very little ways for me to track project participation. So for this vote, I'm purely using the trackable hours that I have access to. And it's up to the member to disclose whether or not they've been involved in a project or an event
That supports our mission.
that supports our mission.
And we've, part of the problem here is we don't have that many events in quotations. We have, the fair. We sometimes do, farmer's market. Pardon? Yeah, every other year we do the home and garden show, or farm and ranch is what it's called.
Yeah.
Farm and ranch show.
Home assessments,
Right.
school.
Workshop. And we did the workshop on smoke. I mean, because that would be the one that I did. I know that one.
We did 2 workshops.
Right.
I did a home assessment for my own home.
That counts.
I learned a lot.
So really, we need to find some better tracking if we're gonna pay a lot of attention to the extra event or extra project ideas. We're just gonna go on the honor system on that one and assume everybody has done something. Because the other hours we can track, and Ella added those up, and everybody who was on that list. Can you go back to that list? Is anybody missing in the blue that they think they should be allowed to vote? Because we could have missed something. Okay. So Laura, this one, typically we're going to use a paper ballot, but since you're on Zoom, this is not that controversial. You could just tell us whether yours is going to be yes or no. Yours won't be secret.
Or you could definitely.
Yeah, I'm
That's correct.
fine with,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm fine with yes. I mean, I was one of those who thought we probably should start working on a board structure a year and a half ago, so I certainly am not going to object now.
I think for record keeping, it would probably be better to have Laura actually chat you in the group
Yeah,
chat.
then it's a record
Then
of
you
it in
have
the
it.
chat.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, in the chat.
Well, okay, let me find chat. I'll work on, you go ahead and do what you need to do and I'll see where I can find here.
Okay. So anyway, for those people who have the new contract, I was talking and you were trying to read, so maybe I'll give you another minute and then we'll make sure you don't have any questions about the contract. Or the new folks who haven't been here long enough, we should give you a contract just so you know, if you want to vote in the future and you plan on coming to regular meetings, you should probably sign the contract tonight. But you won't be able to vote tonight yet. So does anybody have any questions on the contract?
And does anybody need a ballot that didn't get one? Perfect.
Laura's typing
Yeah.
something. We hear your keystroke.
Okay.
Typing up a storm.
Yeah. Each little clickety clack sounds adorable though.
Sounds like an old typewriter.
It did sound a little like an old typewriter.
Lesson, mute when typing.
8 yeses, 0 no, passes unanimously.
Okay. I don't know if you heard that, Laura. It's 8 yeses.
Well, 9.
Oh, nine with
7 and 8.
Oh,
Laura.
8 with Laura. No no's. It passed. All right. Thank you for your participation. Oh, so do you want to talk, Ella, about Qualtrics and tracking hours, or do you want to talk about that, Kimberly?
I certainly can talk about it. Just
Sounds
a
great.
reminder to everybody, so we have about 7 entries that don't have a name on them. So if you're gonna fill in the Qualtrics, make sure that you put your name on there. That is super, super key. I'm gonna try to look through IP addresses and location to see if I can kind of get rid of the ones that don't have a name and associate with them. Hopefully it was just a mistake and just say we have multiple entries. So I'm gonna try to eliminate those, but the Qualtrics is working. It's still up and running. It'll stay that way. The really nice thing about Qualtrics is that, like I said, it is a very sophisticated tool. And so it'll actually tell me where you're logging in to fill in your survey, so I can go back and look at your previous submissions, and that's how I'll go back and backtrack those, blank named ones and see if I can associate with them, with anybody that has already filled them in. And then moving forward, definitely put your name, because that's the only way I'm able to kind of tie hours to you specifically. But everybody else has been doing fine. I was able to send Mike his email. And if you need it, like me to tally that up for you, I did that for Ella. Ella has the spreadsheet where I went in and kind of summated everything so that you would have the right number, but seems to be working. Obviously, when you move to a board structure, that may not necessarily be something that we will be tracking moving forward. I mean, that'll be a board discussion, but that may not be necessary for voting any longer.
And for those who are new and haven't heard of Qualtrics, it's a system they use at the university for tracking hours. And Kimberly has, she's been helpful in helping us use that. We're still trying to get used to it. But it's important that we track volunteer hours, because at some point when we're writing grants, applying for grants, they sometimes need the hours of volunteers, so.
Yeah, and it's a statistics tool basically that we use at the university. You can design it on whatever you want it to do. Basically, you can use picture surveys, you can use regular surveys, and so I just created that piece to kind of track hours. So anything that you type in those little areas where it gives you that free text line, like I get it all. I know Mike has been really good about where his hours have gone, so I can actually see in his other, it'll say like RCC 3 hours and USF, S 2 more hours. And so you can put in as much detail that you want to put into that, and it'll still capture it. But the most important thing is to have your name associated with it, because otherwise I can't tie that to you yet. If you're able to tell me your IP address and where you're located, I might be able to figure out if you did enter and you didn't see your hours up there.
All right, thank you.
Is that?
So now we have a report from Ella on the Paradise Heights Firewise community.
Yeah, so we met with those folks on Saturday to do a recap of the community assessment that we did for them in October. Only, what was it? 8, 9 of the homeowners were there.
Yeah, I think 8.
But we went through the results of the assessment. Overall, the assessment mainly was, the main issues were access, the 5-foot zone, and siding. Almost, I think it was 95% of the homes had wooden siding, and had some sort of deck, firewood stacks, or heavy junipers and pines within their 5-foot zone. That was the main results of the assessment, is what they're going to be focusing on. And they'll be using those results to create their 3-year plan for what they're going to focus on over the next 3 years to maintain that Firewise recognition. Overall, the most complicated piece is going to be that access. There's a pretty tricky easement that Upper Wyatt Lane is on, and that's going to kind of be a bigger beast they're going to tackle for the next couple of years. I'm not sure how that whole thing is going to unfold, to be honest.
It didn't sound hopeful. Apparently they've looked into widening the access, and I don't know if it was the county or the fire department. Somebody wanted it to be wider than they could make it without tearing down a bunch of trees that are on people's property, and the people said, not on my property. I don't want those trees down.
Yeah, and the buried electric is really close to the road, so they'd have to dig up the electrical boxes, and there's a whole thing going on. So we'll continue to be following along with them. However, over the next year, they're just going to be enacting that 3-year plan, logging their hours, and then they'll get that Firewise recognition if they submit those hours and fulfill their requirements, and they'll get that cool sign. But for now, we're gonna go hands-free for a little bit and let them do their work.
So at this point, can fire apparatus go up that road or not?
Depends on the day.
Depends on the day, depends on the weather, and depends on the fire apparatus.
They
Um,
have some places where there are holes this deep.
Yeah, they have to put they have these water bars in, because otherwise the road gets incredibly washed out. But the water bars are pretty dramatic, so you need a fairly high clearance to get over them. And as you get further and further up the road, there's a driveway with a pretty intense hairpin turn, and it gets dicey for sure. So,
I wouldn't live up there for anything.
yeah, so it's an interesting
It's a very
situation.
slow drive.
But it's an important community to be focusing on this. So yeah, stay tuned on their progress.
At least, they did this thinking they were going to get better insurance rates. That was their motivation to start with. But at least they're getting an education about their fire risk, and I think it could turn into something where the neighbors are actually talking to each other more than they have,
It's
and
better than doing nothing.
maybe
Oh, yeah.
helping each other with cleanup.
Well, I mean, just the initial resources we've given them, just our classic educational packets with our home ignition zone handouts and Ember Aware. Those have really helped the folks up there just identify the risks that they have around their homes. So even before we did the community assessment, even before we really even did some of these first meetings, people were using those handouts and doing a bunch of work on their properties, which was really cool to see. They're all interested in getting a full home risk assessment. They're all interested in talking to a forester about their trees. They're all interested in grant opportunities for doing fuels work. So it's a pretty receptive community that's interested in making change. And that's been very encouraging to see. We're just running into those pretty normal hurdles of communication. Some people don't text, some people don't email, some people don't do anything, and they just do word of mouth. So it's just
Some
interesting.
people
It-
schedule meetings and leave
then
town.
they leave town, don't tell anybody, and the meeting's at their house. So that happened. So yeah, it's been funny. The classic dramas of a neighborhood community.
Oh. Yeah, it was a humorous meeting. Okay. So Matt, are you going to give us a fire season review?
All
We
right.
haven't seen you in months.
I know, no, playing in the woods. Back in the fire chief.
Another, that was 29, so yeah. So, I just threw a map up here. This is, from the Risk Management Assistant dashboard. This is, just kind of showing broadly the activity that was around us this summer. Both on forest and the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest there, where you see these red polygons. Uh-oh, sorry about that. I touched it. Like in this area here, this was the Daily Railroad. This was the stuff over at Moose Creek Wildfire. So those, wherever you see those little red icons, this is where we had fires. Those are the footprints from it. Overall, 2024 was about double our average starts. Predominantly lightning, not all, but predominantly. So the pace and of our initial attack was elevated and sustained starting in July. Despite that, and despite the oven drying we had in July, where it was 100 degrees for most of the month, we really turned a corner and started picking up precip along with a lot of lightning in August. But the stage was set there to really feel like a repeat of 2000 from my standpoint, based on those conditions in July. Overall acreages across the forest were just over 40,000, so it wasn't a massive, large acreage impacted, but a lot of time and effort and commitment of our resources, both on the Bitterroot and the BVRD. That's where the bulk of the action was in Region 1 this year. There was a handful of fires. There was one outside of Helena, Horse Gulch, and a handful more over on the east side, but they were relatively short-lived. Whereas these fires we had here, Railroad Daily, Sherritt, Johnson, the stuff down on the river there, Prospect and Elkhorn, those were extended events that went almost 2 months to 3 months apiece. So. So I'll zoom in just a little, or try and zoom in here a little bit, just to give you a little more clarity on what you're looking at. Bear with me here. Trying to get out to the river there on the Salmon River. So I don't know if everyone knew this, but the forest actually goes into Idaho. And we actually have all the way to the Salmon River as part of the Bitterroot National Forest. You can see here the Elkhorn and Prospect. Those are right down on the Salmon River. Those started relatively early in July. There was an unusual elevation break in there where those fires would not keep going up the hill. They would hit this magic line and they would not cross that. And we're guessing, you know, that was inversion or moisture, some kind of a moisture line in there, but they held up there for a good solid 3 weeks before it moved past that. And eventually they did, but that was an anomaly there. These other fires you can see, Reynolds, which is right on the Montana-Idaho border, and also the border of the Salmon Chalice. Those were more in the August timeframe where you see the bulk of the growth there. Magruder straddles in Magruder corridor, and Wilkerson was also from that same timeframe. We did have type 3 teams on Boulder Peak, which you can see this small fire here. The bulk of those efforts were focused on improving a pod boundary there to protect the residents and private property in the bottom of the West Fork, and then along Nez Perce Road. Try and get over here to the
What's a pod?
potential operational delineations. So these are lines that all forests and districts were tasked with developing. Where do we see the most likely when you're going to have a fire in any given spot on your landscape? Where are the most advantageous places to catch that? Whether that be ridge lines, roads, rivers, where is it most likely to hang up on its own? And where some of those are natural features and some of those are features that where we just want to have a fire not move past. So that's a pod boundary that's right on the edge of the private and protects private property in there behind the West Fork Ranger District and over the Nez Perce Ranch there off the Nez Perce Road. And that was utilized to improve that. Fire didn't come and test that, improve it, but that treatment's in there now. Johnson Fire sits right above the Springer Bonanza area. I'll zoom down. You can see that cluster. These purple clusters you see on this map are WUI. This fire started here where you see the little icon, and then kind of had a couple of different iterations where it was a type 4 fire, and then it was a type 3, then back to a type 4, and then back to a type 3. I had a brief moment in there where a CIMT was head management of it when associated with Sherritt, when we thought everything was kind of winding down again. Ultimately it didn't, got active again. And so it's just a sustained summer there of a lot of activity at that type 3 level for sure. Because of that sustained activity, I'll move up here to the Daily Railroad. From my standpoint, the forest got a lot of good repetitions on training folks with type 3 teams, not just in operations, but across all of our function areas of finance, logistics, everything there. We had a bunch of new people that hadn't been exposed to managing at the type 3 level. And so a lot of good work and a lot of good training assignments were had on that. This is the Railroad Daily. Railroad started in late July, and Daily started that first week of August, and those were relatively quiet for quite a while. Ultimately got this green line as the boundary between the Beaverhead Deer Lodge and the Bitterroot. Fire made a good run in here and spotted over and got established and was lined up with the wind to run through some fuels there, but also didn't impact any of the major private Jim Mountain area there. There's a tiny slice of private stuck up in here that it did touch a piece of that, but it did not take the cabin that was associated with that. And then the other big one was Sherritt up just outside of Stevensville. That started during that wind event in late August and immediately got picked up by the wind and drove it across the slope and then slowly spread out. There was a lot of good coordination with the county, VFDs, a lot of good support there with Randy at the helm there, kind of leading that charge. And then a lot of good coordination, 3 different areas we had to do evacuations. So coordination with the county sheriff went really well this summer as well. So that's kind of it in a 10-minute or less snapshot there. Is there any questions I could try and answer for you? I just wanted to give you a little overview of how our summer went and where the major action was at. Oh, Steve, you got more to add? Go ahead.
Just some context, because it's easy. You know, you see these big red blobs and everybody kind of pictures that it's just scorched earth in there. And so from a fire effects standpoint, it actually worked out pretty well. And when we did the BEAR assessment, which is the burned area emergency response, we look at soil burn severity. And all in all, most of the fires were pretty much like about a quarter high severity, about a quarter to a third moderate, and then the rest low and unburned within that perimeter. So really nice mosaics. And on Daly and Johnson in particular, a lot of the area burned was a reburn of the 2000 fire. So stuff that had come in, how many of you guys have seen the 2000 fire started where it's just dog hair thick, lodgepole regen and deadfall, and it's not really any good for anything anymore. And so those fires both got in and cleaned up a lot of that stuff. And so what will come back is a stand that's a lot more open spaced. You don't have that deadfall, a lot more forage. So I really think from an ecological standpoint, we got some good results from the fires that we did have. Even on Sherritt Creek, that was pretty scary to watch that one, but you look at the mosaic now and, it burned through some areas of previous treatment, some areas that we've been working on thinning. And so we didn't have just pure high severity. Again, it's about 25% and then, about a quarter of moderate and the rest low and unburned. I think we had some really good fire effects.
So just an while we're dealing with fire.
Can you speak up?
So along with our fire that we dealt with this fire season, a big community concern was the smoke. And the vast majority of the smoke we were getting from Idaho, specifically 30 miles west of us, which was the wildfire. So just trying to, constantly get the message out that a lot of the smoke that was trapped in the valley wasn't necessarily from our fire, but from Idaho and surrounding fires. That's another major concern. I feel like we were trying to deal with.
Central Idaho had some massive fires.
Yeah.
So the same days when ours were getting up and going, those were getting up and going, and pretty soon we'd be smoked out.
Mhm.
And same for Central Oregon there too.
Yeah.
They had a really impactful year.
So there was more lightning this summer than past summers?
Tremendous amount. And we'd watched lightning storms tracking, and as much as we had, these guys had even more. It was amazing to watch the lightning maps come through here. I mean, just painted through here, then it would sometimes bust over there, sometimes over here. And it seemed like sometimes we'd get rain with it, which would slow it down enough, and sometimes it wouldn't. That I can't remember. It was such a long summer. I can't remember when it happened, but there was, I think we had over on Darby Sula alone, we had over 400 strikes in 3 days. And I remember at one point we had the Lolo Hotshots came down to help us with initial attack. And in 24 hours, they were on 3 different fires. They've been one down in Sula. They barely made it back to the station. They got routed to another one. I think it was the Deer Hollow one there. And then they made it back to the station just in time to go get sent out for another one. So we were hopping. Oh, there's the lightning map.
So this is a little more though. This is occurrences from 92 to 2020. So this is showing fires there lightning caused fires is what it's showing. I actually went and ran May, June, July, August, September, and we had like, we were, I think, at 3,200 strikes just within the forest footprint, and that includes the private and the valley bottoms here too, but that's what the forest footprint was showing, was 3,200 strikes for the summer. I don't have a frame of reference if that's high or low on our average. It felt like it was elevated compared to past years. I can say
Yeah.
that.
And did we have fewer human caused fires this year?
We did, out of, I think, 100 and
It was 116
yesterday.
lightning.
That's just on forest. That's no local government. There's another about 50 or 60 local government, which are predominantly human caused. Meaning the VFDs, the fires the VFDs were responsible to. Also, well, I got this pulled up, kind of, everybody kind of see where we're at, right? You can, I think we're oriented to the Hamilton's here. This is our main Bitterroot Valley, right? I was just gonna pop on this fire history. This is 2020 to 2023, and you can see those fires kind of start to pop in. If I add 2011 to 2019, you see some more in some different colors there, but and then back to 2000, it's a little harder to pick up, but it's quite a lot of our landscape since 2020, so in the last 24 seasons here. Not a whole lot that hasn't been impacted still, though. There's still some holes there, but it's
And
coming.
fire will still go back where it was before too.
Yes, it will.
Well, yeah, it'll carry actively in those fires from 2000, the early 2000s. You know, on daily, what was it, the 2011 fire, that 41?
41 complex.
It was stopping in that one. You know, it wouldn't run through that. It was still. It's a 10-year, the 10-year mark. Yeah. Right, it stops at 10 years, burns through to 20 or 30, and at 40, it slicks it off like sleeping child.
It means
And then you get no regen. So it's that 10, 30, or 10, 25, and 40.
Yeah, we're coming up to 25 on
On the 2000.
Blodgett,
Yeah.
and that is really thick in there. And there's so many people that hike that every day.
A couple other things I want to share with you. We're still chasing hunter fires. Fire season is not completely over. Just this last week, still added a couple more. We're getting a call every day, every other day for similar calls there. Some of those are escape piles and some are escape hunter fires, but.
Yeah, we had one yesterday, a hunter fire. Yeah, always.
So it's not done. It continues to drag on. There was an update from the regional predictive services. They're talking about, the potential effects of La Nina on this winter, having cooler than normal temps and some elevated precip, but it ends sooner than they were hoping. We'd come out of it faster this spring into a neutral state. And so what the results of that may be, we're still waiting to see what those predictions are going to look like, but doesn't look like we're going to get as much benefit out of El Nino as we hoped.
Well, I'm wondering when the snow's gonna start. I mean, it's later than normal.
I've done my rain dance.
They're holding everything off.
I got one more other little thing to share, unless there's any other questions related to fire season or fires we had this year. I just wanted to bring up this ISAP in case you guys have heard any talk about that. There's a whole website here. You can look up that incident strategic alignment process. This is something that us locally as fire management and incident management teams are using to kind of frame up what we're trying to do. I'll just share with you that it's got these 4 major pieces here: the critical values at risk, the strategy and strategic actions, risk to responders, and our probability of success. This is how we're framing up what we're trying to do. There's a pretty little graphic here showing the pillars and how those all kind of work together, but that's kind of the latest thing that we're using to frame up what we're trying to do. So if you want more information on that, you can go find it. You can ask me or Steve or any of the other Forest Service folks here about that. So just wanted to share that's out there in case you're hearing about it.
So if we have meeting agenda in the future that isn't very full, maybe you'd be willing to give us
Share a little more on this.
info on that.
I can, yep. He might volunteer for it too.
You hope.
You bet.
I'm just teasing. That's all. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Remember that? What was that?
I'm surprised there weren't more questions. All right, thank you for that. That was thorough. So we're at 8 o'clock. We have a half an hour left. That means we can have discussion about anything you want to revisit from the parking lot or anything we talked about today, or just some random idea you just thought of that you're gonna volunteer to organize. This is your chance, people. Laura, do you have anything?
Let's see her.
She's turned.
Yeah, so we had a little tour thing that we put on, in October, associated with Montana Forest Products Week. There's another small little grant opportunity through the Montana Wood Processing or Wood Products Association. And, I didn't really involve the Fire and Root Council in this first one, just because it kind of happened really fast, but, I was thinking of trying doing another one in May or something, through this grant, if anyone wanted to be involved.
How's that tie into the Chamber of Commerce one?
That was Missoula,
Missoula County?
yeah,
Okay.
the Chamber of Commerce usually does that.
Okay. But it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of same concept. I think the more we can get people out in the woods.
So do you think by spring we'll have some better news about mills coming in or?
No, I think if someone buys it, it's years. So, yeah, it's,
Did they sell the equipment?
yeah, their equipment already went is up for auction and, I think in the Montana Collaboration Network, Gordy Sanders kind of stated that there's still interested parties in buying it, but revamping and, redoing all that infrastructure, I think, is gonna take several years for that to happen. In the meantime, Sun Mountain Lumber, they're unquoted right now, so they're not taking in wood. There's several loggers that have like hundreds of loads, up on the mountain right now, not able to get them sold, and so there's an uptick hopefully in the market, so.
Well, how does what's going to be some solutions to when we go out and do assessments and we tell landowners they need to cut some trees and they're all, yeah, let's do it. And they even get cost share, grant money to help pay for it. But there's nobody that can take the wood. What are we gonna do at that point? We are pretty much there, aren't we?
Kinda, yeah. Not all the way, but yeah. So it's not great right now.
So at some point, we may need to think about reworking what our message is on,
Tell them not to do any home remodels. Instead of doing a home remodel, do a forest remodel, I guess.
and do what with the wood that they
Burn it,
cut.
that's what's happening.
And then you get the people,
Chipping it, turn it into paper. So it's kind of, yeah, sad, a lot of logs on some of our projects instead of.
Judy, I went out, in the last couple of months, I've been out doing county assessment. I'm going around to all the little mills and looking at little ways we can expand capacity for those little mills to be able to operate and accept more raw material from the tourists. And I mean, they're mostly, most of those little mills are just down in little alcoves out in the open, and just a simple roof over the top of some of these mills would so much expand their capacity, but it's finding the right grant opportunity. And the showstopper for all of these mills are the SAM process, the system for award management, none of them have it. So like Frontier Post and Polls, we were looking at $1 million system that would make their operation, they could use so much more of that, that beetle kill and the fire kill that's coming out of the vehicle. But they don't have the drying facility in there, so they can't work when there's moisture in there. So that was my idea, was if we could help, some of these mill owners that are basically putting 80 hours a week in just to, make their mill work. If we could get some sort of capacity to help these mill owners, those federal grants and those granting opportunities, they'll be able to use more of that material. And it would help everybody out.
So is it, I mean, basically what this, for the people who want to remodel their forest rather than their house, what they're stuck with at the end is brush piles have been burned and they've got a big log deck that they can't send anywhere. Am I understanding that correctly?
Kinda. I mean, I have a couple projects where, yeah, there's some log decks there, but typically before we approve the projects. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just going to pulp or they're decking them up at their own log yards that some of our loggers have. So,
Yeah, I see if people end up just burning what they have, then we have the problem with the smoke. That is another huge problem. And so I don't know what the answers are, but maybe somebody will get creative and come
Well,
up
we
with.
talked at one point about a biomass facility or something like that.
Well, they used to have one in Darby School, didn't they?
Yeah, the Fuels for Schools program, through state and private. Darby was the only one locally, right?
Yeah.
Is that still going?
Yeah.
Is that program still going?
Oh, it is?
Victor still
Yeah.
uses. Victor still uses.
Victor does? And University of Montana was trying to do that, but the air quality stuff limited their opportunity to ramp that one up.
Montana Western has an advanced facility that's almost like the school of Darby, but it's so they use biomass, and they get their material from close to Pullman on town.
It'd be good to have somebody, whoever's got that Fuels for Schools deal, Atkins would know who has it now.
Talk to us.
And have them come and do one of our little short presentations.
The problem with Darby, and this is, well, it's now 4 or 5 years ago. When I had, my own little wood lot treated, they just weren't interested. They really wanted fir and I had ponderosa pine and they had more than they could use.
and I think that's even more the case now because people
It
are kind of,
is.
they're even getting more picky about what they take.
Yeah, and Pyramid was the only mill that was taking ponderosa pine when they went out of business. And if you got somebody to go back into business, they're not gonna wanna take pine.
Doing any research into maybe developing a pellet mill around or pellet manufacturing facility in the valley?
I don't know what's going on as far as looking at that, but maybe, those same people, whoever's got the Fuels for Schools also has wood utilization for other stuff. And, the Forest Products Lab in Wisconsin probably has kind of the formula for what is needed to get a pellet mill going.
Because right now, most of our pellets, like I know the Super One, they're coming out of North Idaho.
Which is better than coming out of a lot further away,
Yeah.
at least that's upwind,
Trying to steer clear of pellet because it costs so much to get it in the pellet form. Then the energy to get it sites, not as much as they would want. They're looking at sustainable aviation fuel. or methane reforming. Something along the lines of that to make.
It'd be nice to get somebody that has the breadth of experience and knowledge to give us kind of a mile wide and a couple inches deep of all the possible things that could happen to the wood we gotta get rid of. We're gonna have so much biomass. I mean, we already have too much biomass. That's the objective, is getting rid of it.
I would suggest if you wanted a guy like that, it'd be Bob Vanderbilt. He's around, he's in Stevensville, Northwestern Biofuel. He says that they have a $40 million processing facility in the Central Valley of Sacramento. And the reason they have it there is because they've got a steady raw material supply of almond trees coming out of the almond farms. So you can, in order to set a system like that up in the valley, you know, say sets it up in Stevensville, you've got 93 trucks coming into Stevensville with the raw materials, then you got 93 trucks coming out of Stevensville, going the other way to put it on the railroad. And if he said if he could bring the railroad just down to Stevensville, it would probably make his project more lucrative. But then again, he's got to have that steady input of supply, you know, raw material. And you can't get that guarantee off of the national forest, which is where it's at. You've got about 32 million allowable sell quantity out there, 32 million cubic feet. Right now, so last year it was 810,000. So all that fuel that's not being, or all the timber that's not being sold out there is now being called hazardous wildfire.
I missed what is the output that he would be shipping?
Bob Vanderbilt,
Pellets, is that what you're talking about?
sustainable aviation fuel is what he said. And then he says he's got a system to make low sulfur diesel fuel as well. And he can make biochar, but he would be the guy that would come in and, you know, we can do this and this and this, and he gets out his calculator and starts pushing buttons, and it'll cost this and this and this.
Maybe this is the time for me to plug my firewood that's sitting on the edge of the road. Anybody need firewood? Ponderosa pine? Easy access.
I've got
Yeah.
more than I need.
Well, that doesn't sound like we're gonna be able to solve that problem, but it's a big problem for, I mean, the people that we do assessments for are asking that question. How am I gonna be able to get rid of what I wanna get rid of?
I don't think that this would probably be a very good public workshop. But there's enough different components to this problem to where we could inform ourselves in a series of post-meeting short presentations, you know. Yeah, you're talking about Bob Vanderbilt, maybe somebody from Fuels for Schools, maybe somebody from the what's the Economic Research Unit?
Development Authority or business.
Bureau of Economic Research, yeah, because they've got a really different look at it. You know, and there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 different angles. And if we put it together to where we had a half an hour at the end of each meeting dedicated to that, we could at least be well informed internally. And I'd help Steve coordinate that.
I can
I
afford.
mean, one, go ahead. You know, one aspect that I don't have the data, I know who could help us with that, is that with Sun Lumber, they're able to get, I mean, their profit model, let's say, large scale is better. They have as with what you were just discussing about the Stevensville 90 trucks in and out. For Sun, if they can get a big area or a large supply source, it's more worth their time. And, that basically means they're going to do landscape Forest Service sources for their lumber before they're going to do small private projects of the kind of homeowners that we're focusing on as really better, what can I say, as more useful for community fire defense than what's happening out on the forest. But the forest removal of biomass and putting it in a mill is more attractive. I don't know. I hope I'm being clear here. Is more attractive to processor.
Right.
Right. You need both.
Mhm.
You need a steady supply coming from industrial, private, state, and federal lands. But if you've got that, then you can feed in these little mom and pop operations as they become available, but you can't build it around a sporadic and episodic supply.
Well, yeah, and they're all just not interested in that lower supply, because why would they be when they can get something that's more efficient and profitable for them?
But if they've got that, then they can take a little extra here and a little extra there.
Well, to that profit margin, Sun Mountain just bought 900 million board feet out of some litigation. Or 9 million, not 100, it's 9 million board feet, sorry, put an extra zero. So they bought it, and they bought, I believe, they got the fir at $425 for 1,000 board feet, and the pine is like $150 for 1,000 board feet. Now, if you think about putting pine on a logging truck, you only get about 4,000 board feet sometimes 4,500 board feet. So that's a load of logs that's now only going to bring, what's 150 times 4? That's like $600. That doesn't even hardly pay the logging truck driver to drive it over the Sun Mountain. So they had to subsidize that huge, and they're taking it. You know where they're taking? They're taking it like Huntsville, I think, on the pine.
TRL, either TRL or the Thompson River Lumber is the only place that.
Somewhere that's where they're taking the pine to, so to make it profitable for them, the pine is gonna have to have an influx of commercial use, or it's gonna have to be subsidized.
And that's the kind of stuff we need to be informed about. And the Bureau of Business and Economic Research, their forestry side, those people know that stuff better than anybody, really, especially for Montana.
Yeah, they gave a presentation at the Montana Forest Collaborative last month. It was pretty fascinating, because they went into not just the economic effects of the mill, but the economic effects, to the town and the lost wages there. Then the effects to the businesses that depend on the mill to buy their products, keep the mill going.
Right.
And it went from whatever the estimate was, or 20 million originally, so it was like a $50 million annual hit.
Yeah, and it's the mills and the residual processors have such a symbiotic relationship that you can't get along without both of them. And now we've lost both of them, the Pyramid and Rose.
Yeah.
Roseburg.
Sun Mountain, they gotta haul their stuff off, I think the coast, with Oregon.
Oh, the residuals, yeah. Yeah, it goes a long ways. But anyway, I think we could structure those things to be just short programs, maybe February, March, April, or January, February, March, April. And be a lot better informed at the end of it.
Is,
I don't think it's a good public presentation. 'cause
Right.
Nobody,
I have a question about, fir versus pine. Most of the areas where we have landowners isn't it true that most of that is ponderosa pine?
most of
And then when we get back further into Forest Service, how much pine versus fir is back there?
depends on the elevation.
Their lower elevation is still predominantly on roads. As you climb up and you get into Doug Ferry, full large valley.
And most of your near-term fuel treatments are probably mostly pine.
Pine or, yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things on the horizon. One, I talked to a small mill guy the other day. He does timber frame construction. So he's talking about going back to his engineers and saying, engineer me something that I could do with pine. Right now, they build with fir, but basically everybody's willing to give their pine away. So even if it takes doing the beams twice as big, it's still economical because the wood is so cheap. So I mean, there's things like that that are coming. The other thing coming out of the wood research facility in Wisconsin is cross-laminated timbers, you know, the big structural panels.
Right.
Well, they've been doing testing, and while ponderosa pine is not strong structurally for 2x4s, when you do it in CLT, it's the strongest wood there is.
Right.
And particularly ponderosa pine in western Montana. So there's folks around the world looking at this market for that business. They're putting a new CLT facility up in Kalispell, Stoltz lumber. They got a wood product stream.
Of course, Stoltz would be doing.
So I think there are things that will be coming in the next few years. They're just not here right now.
Is the series of presentations that you're putting out there, is that something that maybe the fuels team would be interested in looking at? Kind of covering for this group? Since
Who's the fuels team?
You,
that's my next question. Seems like mainly just Josh, but sounds like there's a whole lot of folks in the room that are interested in this subject and knowledgeable. Not to volunteer anybody for a job, but.
But it's probably some intersection of fuels and outreach. Even though the outreach is to ourselves, it's still outreach. So we gotta organize some speakers. But there's so many available. I mean, we live in the right spot for finding experts. And getting them to come in and talk to us. And we're not asking for big time commitments. 30, 45 minutes, you know. At the most. And one time.
well, let's say 30 minutes because we're coming up on.
Yeah,
30.
30 minutes would probably.
And if we had a meeting that went another 10 minutes, how many of you would stay another half hour after working all day and sitting through an hour and a half?
Yeah, 30.
Raise your hands if you would come to that 30-minute presentation at the end.
I would.
We have some shaky hands.
Well, I think it would depend, quite honestly. What's not clear to me, right, from what, I mean, this has really been an interesting conversation. Where, you know, what is the value of these presentations beyond what we've sort of identified tonight? I mean, what we're looking at is the problem with the HIZ projects. Is that correct? And how does, you know, how how new data would tell us more about that issue than we actually covered tonight.
I don't think it would tell us more about the HIZ per se, but I think it would tell us more about the kind of conversations we could have with landowners. And the kind of conversations that Josh in particular could have with landowners, because you deal with this every day, probably. So I wanna get this treated. How, who can do it and what are they gonna do with it? And am I gonna have a big bunch of piles to burn? You know? So I think it's more for our assessment discussions with landowners. I think that's where the value of the education is. Nobody's gonna come to us and say, so what do you think about solving this problem?
You know, and talking to people out there though, too, they run into somebody that, take an idea like this and try and do something with it.
Yeah, you never know.
In this valley.
You never know.
That's why I think it shouldn't, I don't think it should be necessarily internal, I think we should. You know,
Yeah.
I guess.
What
I'm
do
just
you-
a little gun shy after the last one we had, which I thought was gonna be so well received and it really wasn't. The smoke one, we had twice as many people as I thought we were gonna have, and we had half as many at the second one. So could have been timing, it could have been the topic, it could have been anything. But
And it was probably partly the speaker. A lot of people know Dr. Peter Kolb. He's got a radio show and, you know,
I think the second one, I think might have been a little tiny.
I think it was largely timing, but
Because I think it wasn't that Father's Day weekend.
Yep.
yeah. And we bumped it back a couple of times, so we necessarily did it to ourselves.
Yeah, so this might be something we add to the outreach team agenda for
Yeah,
Yeah.
this coming month. Let's
Yeah.
start exploring the.
Banter along
let's explore it there. We
Okay.
could find Steve's assignment.
I have a question, whatever happened to Connor's manufactured firewood program that they had?
I don't know.
Remember they were making fire, they were actually making cords of manufactured logs?
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was gonna be the next big thing, but it petered out after a short period of time. Like, they had a press and everything down there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't like Presto logs.
Absolutely.
And his kids were still moving.
No, I think when he died, that was.
I mean, there was one of those,
Oh, yeah. This is.
before pellets were pellet mills, there were these Stoker tips, which are about that big around, about that long. And they were like little tiny Presto logs, and they used to make them, not too far from the sugar beet. Now I'm really sounding old, but out on Reserve, before Reserve was Reserve, there was sugar beets, pellets, and a meat packing plant.
They meet back in place, so.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. Does anybody have anything profound they want to finish with? Call me if you want firewood. Okay, I think we are going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Before
Oh,
we adjourn this
before
meeting,
we adjourn.
however, the next meeting is January 7th. Same location, same time. If you have any agenda items you'd like to be on the next meeting agenda, if you have an idea for a presentation, feel free to tell me or Judy after the meeting, send me an email, shoot me a text. We welcome your input.
And
So
Hardy
we are,
Canning.
well, I guess the question is, isn't the past, haven't we skipped January? But this year we're gonna have a January meeting?
I think it was because of the date is close to New Year's is when the first Tuesday fell on.
Yeah, you should be well over a hangover by the 7th.
No, I thought it was because we got a break.
Okay. See you in January.
It doesn't take much to get.
Thank you for coming. This is a good meeting.
No, it's very, yeah.
Yeah.
And then just let me know when I left.
Yeah. And I gotta call it back. Oh, I know.
Sound people were person.
I'm doing